Hey y'all, welcome back. This week I'm going to share with you some delicious fall dessert recipes. They are so good, you're going to love them. We're going to start out with making a delicious Mexican drink called horchata. This is one of my favorite Mexican drinks. It's so easy to make, and we've got something similar that my mom made when I was growing up. All you have to do is replace the rice with cornmeal and the cinnamon. You leave the cinnamon out and then kind of follow all the directions that I'm going to share with you today. And it's pretty much the same thing. But she also made this when I was growing up as well. So in this bowl here, I've just got a cup and a half of white rice. And I just added some boiling hot water to this, along with a cinnamon stick that I just broke in half. And I let this soak covered overnight. So what we're going to do is I'm going to add all of this into my blender cup here, including the cinnamon sticks. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so I've got everything in here. I'm going to add 3/4 of a cup of sugar. If you don't want it as sweet, you can always add less sugar. So I'm just going to add that right in there. I'm going to put my lid on, and we're going to blend this up until everything is nice and smooth. Okay, so this is nice and well blended. I've got my bowl here, and I've got a strainer, and all I'm going to do is strain this through my little fine mesh strainer just to get any bigger chunks. I'm doing this because it's easier for me to pour this into my cup than it is to pour it in here from here to the cup. Okay, so I've got my little cup here, or my jar that I'm going to serve it in, and all I'm going to do is just pour this into my jar. And y'all, this smells just so good, and it tastes even better. Now we're going to add in some vanilla. I'm going to add about a teaspoon. This is some homemade vanilla that I made last year, and it just adds so much flavor. I love making homemade vanilla. So easy. Then we're going to add some evaporated milk and some sweetened condensed milk, a can each. Okay, and before we add the rest of our milk, I'm going to give this a nice little mix just to incorporate that sweetened condensed milk in here. Okay, and now I'm going to add in 4 cups of whole milk. You can do almond milk. Okay, and now I'm just going to make sure this is nice and well combined. And then I'm going to put my lid on this and pop this in the fridge so it stays nice and cold. And then this will be a great dessert drink for after dinner. All right, you guys, here is this delicious drink. It is so creamy, so flavorful. You're going to love it. I will leave this recipe linked down in the description box below, but it is so good. All right, y'all, now we're going to be making some rice pudding. This was one of my dad's favorite recipes. He always had this in the refrigerator. He loved it so much, but it's super simple to make. Today I'm going to be making a different recipe than my father's recipe, but if you want to check that one out, I will leave that one linked in the description box as well. It's in my it's on my blog. So in here I've got 6 cups of water. I'm going to add about 1/4 teaspoon of salt, not much salt at all, just enough to bring out the flavors later, and 2 cinnamon sticks. Now, I've got one regular cinnamon stick, and look at this little baby cinnamon stick. It was the only one that was left in there, so it's just gonna have to do. But this is the smallest cinnamon stick ever, but it'll be fine. So we're gonna bring that to a boil. It should take about 5 to 10 minutes or so. And then in the meantime, I'm going to rinse off about 2 cups of rice. And then we'll get this going. So I'm going to go ahead and let this come up to a boil, and then we'll go from there. All right, so this come up to a boil, and I just cut it down just slightly so it's not popping all over the place when I add the next ingredients. So I've got a half a cup of sugar here, and I'm just going to add that in here and give that a nice little mix to start it to melt. And I've got my rice. It's already rinsed and drained, so we're just going to add all of that in here. Now we're just going to let this come up to a boil. We're going to let this cook for about 20 minutes. I'm going to cover this up with a lid and come in every once in a while and just give it a stir, just to make sure that rice isn't sticking to the bottom of the pot. So I will see you in just a second. All right, so this has been cooking for 20 minutes. It is nice and thickened, but the rice is not completely cooked yet. I'm going to go ahead and add in 4 cups of milk. Now, if you want this a little bit more thin, you can add more milk. I don't want it too thin. So I'm just going to add 4 cups. And if it gets too thick, I can adjust it later. So I'm just going to go ahead and give this a nice little mix just to get things going. I'm also going to add in 1 can of evaporated milk and 1 can of sweetened condensed milk. And we're going to give this a nice little mix, just to be careful so it doesn't splash up on you. Just until everything is nice and combined. And I've got my heat set on medium-low. And we're going to let this cook for another 20 to 25 minutes until it's thickened up and that rice is nice and tender. Just to be sure to come in here very often and give this a stir so the rice don't stick to the bottom of the pot. And then I'll show you what this looks like when it gets done. All right, you guys, this has been cooking for about 30 minutes. I let it go over just a little bit, just to thicken up a little bit more, just slightly. And just because I can, I'm going to add a little bit of vanilla, about a teaspoon. You don't have to add any if you don't want to, but I'm going to be extra today and add a little bit. And plus, it just tastes good. Vanilla adds just that little something to a dish, a dessert dish. It's just so good. So I'm going to stir this in, and I'm going to set this to the side and let it cool down a little bit because it is very hot right now. And I do not want to burn my mouth because hot rice is it's very, very hot. It's like lava. So I'm going to let this cool down a little bit, and then we'll serve it up.
All right, you guys, here is this delicious bowl of rice pudding. I grew up eating rice pudding, so it's very comforting to me, especially today since it's kind of cool and rainy outside. It just made for the perfect ending to a meal. It was just so good. All of these recipes will be linked down in the description box below, so be sure to check them all out.
All right, you guys, so today we're going to be making something that I've never made before, but I've had before. Now, I've had pumpkin cobbler before. It is so good, but we're going to make it today. I found this recipe on Pinterest, and it just looked so good, so we're going to make it, give it a try. In my bowl here, I've got some flour, and to that we're going to add some baking powder and some salt, as well cloves, cinnamon, and nutmeg. And we're just going to give this a little mix. Now this makes a 8 by 8 inch cake, which is fine because we're not going to eat that much. Like if it's a bigger cake, we won't eat that much. So I feel a little bit better making it a little bit smaller. An 8 by 8 will do just fine for all of us. Alright, so I've got that mixed. And we're going to mix up our wet ingredients now. So I've got some pumpkin here, it's about 1/2 cup. I've got some butter here that I've melted. So I'm going to add my milk and my sugar. We're going to mix this all together, make sure it's nice and combined. And we're going to add in a little bit of vanilla, about 2 teaspoons, or however much you like. I love vanilla. It just smells good. It makes everything taste good. I've also got my oven preheating to 350 degrees. So that just come up to temperature. And that is well mixed. So I'm going to pour my wet ingredients into my dry ingredients. Okay. And I'm just going to mix this until everything is nice and combined. I might have to switch to my spatula. So we'll see how this goes. Alright, so I had to switch to my spatula. The batter got kind of thick because the recipe didn't call for any eggs, so it's going to be a little thick, but it smells delicious. And there's no more dry spots of flour in my batter, so we're good to go. So we're going to set this to the side for just a minute. And we're going to work on our topping. Alright, so in here I've got some regular granulated sugar. I use raw cane sugar, but you can use any kind of sugar that you have on hand. And I've also got some brown sugar. And I've got some chopped pecans here. I just kind of roughly chopped them up. Looks like I missed a few pieces, but that's fine. We're going to add all of those in there. And we're going to mix this up until everything is nice and combined. It has been a minute since I've had pecan cobbler. It's been a couple of years, but it's so good. The last time I had it, my mom made it. I don't know where she got the recipe from, but it was so good. She made it in the crock pot. I'm going to have to ask her where she got the recipe from and try to make it one day this year during the fall and winter season. So that is all nice and combined. I'm going to grab my baking dish. Alright, so my baking dish is already greased. So I'm going to go ahead and add all of my batter. Okay. I'm just going to spread this out as best as I can. Make sure it's nice and even and up to the edges. My hands are clean, so I'm just going to scrape off this extra little bit here. Now it says to sprinkle this mixture over the top. Okay, now here is where this recipe kind of loses me, but it says trust the process, so I'm going to trust the process. I've got 1.5 cups of really hot water, and it says to just pour it all over the top. So I'm going to carefully pour it all over the top, and it says to not stir. So I'm not going to stir it. Even though I really, really want to, I'm not going to. Now it says to bake it for 40 to 45 minutes or until the center comes out clean. Since I'm cooking this in a clear pan, it might take a little bit longer, so I'll show you what it looks like when it gets done. All right, you guys, here is the cobbler. It looks and smells so delicious, but I've got to let it cool. It says to let it cool for about 10 minutes, and I've checked it. The center is done. It took about 42 minutes, but I'm going to let this sit and cool for a little bit, and then we'll cut a slice and give it a taste.
All right, you guys, here it is. This was so good. Now, let me tell you, the hot water had me quite concerned because I just honestly didn't think it was going to turn out, but it did, and it made the most delicious sauce. The sauce kind of settles on the bottom, and the cake kind of bakes up on top, and it gets just so gooey. It's so good. Trust the process. Trust me, it is absolutely delicious. I just spooned that sauce over the top of this cake and added a little bit more pecans, and it was just out of this world delicious. But I hope you guys enjoyed this week's video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to leave me a comment in the comment section down below. I love chit-chatting with all of you, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, y'all.